The journey to sharpening the mind begins the moment you realize that mental strength is not something people are born with. It is something they build with intentional decisions every single day. Machiavelli observed that the sharpest minds in history were not always the most educated nor the most talented. They were the most aware. They paid attention, they questioned, they analyzed. They understood that the world is a battlefield of ideas and only the mentally awake survive with influence. So today, imagine that your mind is a sword. Dull or sharp, heavy or light, everything depends on how you train it. And this is where your transformation begins. A mind that becomes 200% sharper does not happen through luck. It happens when you stop living on autopilot. Most people move through life repeating routines, reacting emotionally, and absorbing distractions without questioning them. But the Machiavellian mind pauses and asks, why? Who benefits? What is the hidden intention? What is the deeper pattern behind what I'm seeing? The moment you start asking these questions, your intelligence expands, and the fog of confusion starts to clear. You begin to see connections, opportunities, risks, and strategies that others overlook. Machiavelli believed that the most powerful people had one trait, clarity. They saw reality for what it truly was, not for what they wished it would be. A sharp mind starts with ruthless honesty. When you stop lying to yourself about your weaknesses, your habits, your excuses, and your fears, you gain control. Most people avoid the truth because the truth forces you to change. But when you face it, your perception becomes sharper and you begin making decisions with precision instead of emotion. This clarity alone increases your mental sharpness more than any book or course ever could. Your mind becomes powerful when you learn to separate emotions from strategy. Machiavelli never advised people to be emotionless. He advised them to never let emotions interfere with judgment. When you are angry, you react. When you are fearful, you freeze. When you are excited, you overlook risks. A sharp mind understands emotions but never lets them lead. Instead, you observe them, decode them, and choose your response. This is how you become unpredictable, unshakable, and mentally agile. To sharpen your mind drastically, you must learn the art of deep observation. Every powerful thinker is first a powerful observer. Pay attention to people's tone, their pace, their inconsistencies. Listen to what they say and also what they avoid saying. Observe how situations unfold, how groups behave, how patterns repeat. Most of the world's intelligence is not hidden. It is simply ignored. The ones who sharpen their mind learn to notice the subtle signals that others miss, and that gives them an advantage in decision-making. Another key principle Machiavelli emphasized is the ability to control your attention. Your attention is your mental currency. Whatever consumes it controls your life. When your attention is scattered across distractions, entertainment, gossip, and emotional drama, your mind becomes dull, weak, and reactive. But when you harness your attention, when you direct it consciously, your brain literally rewires itself to become sharper. You think faster, remember more, and solve problems with greater accuracy. A 200% sharper mind is built through the discipline of focus. If you can control what your mind pays attention to, you can shape your entire destiny. The next step is learning how to question what you consume. Information overload makes people feel informed while actually making them mentally slower. But a Machiavellian-trained mind filters information, not absorbs it blindly. Don't just ask, is this true? Ask, who wants me to believe this? Don't just ask, is this useful? Ask, how does this benefit me? When you start treating information as strategy instead of entertainment, your brain begins connecting dots faster and forming insights others cannot. Now let's explore something deeper, the power of mental solitude. Sharp minds are not created in noise, they are created in silence. Your brain needs space to think, to analyze, to reflect. Most people fear silence because silence forces them to confront their thoughts. But the strongest mind seeks solitude because that is where ideas form, plans develop, and clarity emerges. If you spend even 20 minutes a day in uninterrupted silence, your mental processing speed begins to increase dramatically. You start solving problems in your head, seeing outcomes before they happen, predicting people's behavior with surprising accuracy. It's not magic, it's clarity born from silence. Machiavelli also understood that the mind becomes sharp when it faces difficulty. People who avoid challenges develop fragile minds. People who confront difficulty develop strategic minds. Every challenge forces your brain to think, adapt, calculate, evaluate, and overcome. These cognitive processes sharpen your mind like a blade being refined against stone. A comfortable life weakens intelligence. A life shaped by challenges strengthens it. So instead of wishing for an easy path, choose the path that forces you to think. That is how you gain an intellectual edge over others. Another important factor is learning from people without copying them. A sharp mind studies everyone, enemies, allies, mentors, even strangers, because everyone reveals something about human nature. But a sharp mind never imitates blindly. It extracts principles, adapts them, and applies them strategically. Machiavelli observed that the strongest minds were independent yet flexible. They learned continuously but acted uniquely. This combination produces originality, creativity, and unexpected solutions that make your intelligence stand out. To become mentally sharper, you also need to master cognitive contrast, challenging your own thoughts with opposing perspectives. When you only think in one direction, your mind becomes rigid. But when you consider multiple angles, your mind becomes flexible and capable of seeing hidden possibilities. Think like a strategist. If this is true, what else must be true? If this approach fails, what is the backup plan? If someone is acting this way, what are the possible motives behind it? The more directions you can think in, the sharper your mind becomes. Memory is another element of mental sharpness. Many people believe they have a bad memory, but in reality, they have unfocused attention. Your brain remembers what it considers important. So to sharpen your memory, attach meaning to what you want to remember. Build associations, visualize connections, and repeat the core idea in your own words. Machiavelli believed that intelligence is not just what you learn, but what you can retrieve instantly. A sharp memory is a powerful weapon because it gives you access to knowledge at the exact moment you need it. Your mind becomes sharper when you intentionally expose yourself to complex ideas. Don't limit yourself to content that's easy to digest. Read philosophy, psychology, strategy, history. Your brain grows when it struggles. The moment you push beyond what feels comfortable, your mental capacity expands. Machiavelli himself was shaped by observing politics, human behavior, and power dynamics. He didn't rely on a single source of knowledge. He absorbed the world around him. This broadened perspective allowed him to think in ways others couldn't. Another way to enhance mental sharpness is mastering the art of prediction, not fortune-telling, but pattern recognition. Humans are creatures of habit. Systems repeat, people follow predictable emotional cycles. When you learn to recognize these patterns, you can anticipate outcomes before they happen. A mind trained to predict becomes faster, sharper, and far more influential. This is how Machiavellian thinkers stay ahead, not by reacting, but by foreseeing. A 200% sharper mind also requires emotional detachment from outcomes. When you stop obsessing over results, your mind becomes free to focus on strategy. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you stay rational. You think before you act. You adjust without panic. You look at situations from a higher perspective. This emotional freedom gives you mental speed. Because fear and desperation no longer cloud your thinking. Communication is another dimension of mental sharpness. Most people speak without intention. Sharp minds speak with purpose. They know when to talk, when to stay silent, and when to use silence as a weapon. Machiavelli warned that revealing too much weakens your advantage. When your words are selective, thoughtful, and strategic, people see you as intelligent, confident, and calculated. Your mind becomes sharper because your thinking becomes deliberate. Then comes discipline, perhaps the most difficult and most essential element. A sharp mind cannot grow in an undisciplined life. Your habits either strengthen your brain or weaken it. Every time you procrastinate, overindulge, or escape discomfort, your mind becomes dull. But every time you follow through on a task, resist temptation, or push yourself mentally, your brain strengthens. Discipline builds cognitive endurance. It gives your mind the strength to hold focus, resist impulses, and analyze deeply. The sharper your discipline, the sharper your mind becomes. To reach the highest level of mental sharpness, you must also learn the art of detaching from the opinions of others. A weak mind fears judgment. A sharp mind remains unaffected. Machiavelli understood that public opinion changes like the wind. Though if your mind is influenced by every opinion, you lose clarity. But when your thoughts remain stable regardless of others' reactions, your intelligence operates at full capacity. You make decisions based on logic, not approval. And that is the beginning of true intellectual freedom. Reflection is another powerful tool. Spend time reviewing your decisions, your reactions, your mistakes, and your wins. This is how you learn faster than the average person. Reflection turns experience into wisdom. Without reflection, experiences repeat. With reflection, experiences become lessons that sharpen your understanding of yourself and the world. Finally, a sharp mind requires purpose. Without purpose, the mind drifts. Without direction, it wanders. Machiavelli observed that the individuals with the sharpest minds were those driven by a goal larger than themselves: influence, power, mastery, impact, legacy. When your mind is anchored to a purpose, it filters out distractions automatically. Your decisions become strategic, your focus becomes stronger, and your intelligence begins to operate at a higher frequency. If you want your mind 200% sharper, build clarity, focus, observation, discipline, reflection, and strategic thinking into your daily life. Every moment becomes a chance to train your mind. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to analyze. Every challenge becomes a tool to refine your thinking. You begin to see the truth beneath appearances, motives behind actions, patterns behind behavior, and opportunities hidden in chaos. And when that happens, you don't just become smarter, you become unstoppable. When the mind becomes sharper, the world itself begins to look different. Things you once ignored suddenly stand out. The intentions behind people's actions become clearer. The dynamics in conversations reveal themselves like hidden codes. You begin to sense who is genuine, who is pretending, who is insecure, who is manipulative, who is secretly powerful, and who is silently observing you back. This heightened perception is not supernatural. It is the natural result of training your mind to pay attention with intensity. A Machiavellian mind understands that power doesn't always show up loudly. Sometimes the sharpest minds operate quietly, listening more than speaking, watching more than reacting. Silence becomes a strategy. Pauses become tools. Calmness becomes a shield. The sharper your mind becomes, the less you feel the need to prove anything. Intelligence no longer needs a display. It reveals itself automatically through your decisions, your stability, and your understanding of situations. Another key to sharpening your mind is reducing mental noise. Most people suffer from a cluttered mind, full of scattered thoughts, impulsive emotions, unresolved memories, and unnecessary worries. A dull mind is not a weak mind. It is simply a crowded mind. To sharpen it, you must declutter, eliminate things that drain your mental energy. Remove the people who bring confusion. Stop consuming content that adds no value. When you cut away the noise, your brain frees up processing power, and suddenly your thinking becomes clearer, faster, and more accurate. The Machiavellian approach to mental clarity also involves emotional boundaries. One of the biggest reasons people lose sharpness is emotional entanglement. Caring too much about people who don't contribute to their growth, getting involved in drama, letting others manipulate their feelings. Emotional entanglement creates cognitive fog. But emotional boundaries protect your clarity. When you stop allowing others to control how you feel, your mind stops reacting and starts analyzing. You see situations for what they are, not for how they make you feel. To sharpen your mind further, begin controlling your internal dialogue. Every person has a voice inside their head that shapes their beliefs, actions, and reactions. But most people don't control that voice. They let it run wild. A sharp mind disciplines that voice. Instead of saying, "I can't," it asks, "How can I?" Instead of thinking this is too hard, it thinks, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of panicking under pressure, it says, "Stay calm, observe, understand." The moment you start controlling your inner voice, your mental strength multiplies. Machiavelli often emphasized that fortune favors the prepared mind. Sharpness is not only about intelligence, it's about readiness. A prepared mind always has options. It anticipates outcomes, it sees exits, it predicts reactions. When you learn to prepare mentally, you become impossible to corner, impossible to trap, and very difficult to deceive. Preparedness increases mental sharpness because it reduces hesitation. You stop second-guessing yourself. You act with clarity and confidence. Another layer to mental sharpness is adaptability. The world changes quickly. People shift loyalties, opportunities appear and disappear. Power dynamics evolve. A rigid mind breaks under pressure, but an adaptable mind thrives in chaos. Adaptability sharpens your intelligence because it forces your brain to stay flexible, creative, open to new strategies. Machiavelli understood that adaptability was a sign of superior intellect, the ability to change direction without losing purpose. There is also the power of learning through contrast. Study strong people and weak people. Study loyal people and disloyal people. Study honest people and deceptive people. Study winners and losers. Every contrast teaches the mind a new pattern. The more patterns you recognize, the sharper your thinking becomes. You start predicting situations not from guesswork, but from deep understanding of human nature. Another powerful technique for sharpening your mind is practicing mental detachment during conflicts. Every conflict tests your intelligence more than your strength. When you detach mentally, you stop reacting emotionally and start observing strategically. You see the other person's motives, their insecurities, their weaknesses. You see the direction the conflict is moving. You see what they want and what they fear. This awareness gives you control, and control sharpens the mind. Speaking less is also a Machiavellian strategy that increases mental sharpness. When you speak less, you listen more. And when you listen more, you learn more. People reveal everything, their intentions, their fears, their desires, their plans, if you give them space. A sharp mind doesn't rush to fill silence. It lets silence do the work. Silence reveals truth, and truth sharpens intelligence. Another important element is mastering the art of emotional immunity. Emotional immunity means that the world no longer shakes you. Insults don't destabilize you. Rejection doesn't break you. Failure doesn't define you. Praise doesn't blind you. Emotional immunity is not about being cold. It is about being centered. When your emotions are stable, your thoughts remain sharp, and your decisions become accurate. A mind that is easily disturbed cannot be sharp. A mind that remains calm under pressure becomes powerful. Mental sharpness also increases when you hold yourself accountable. Every mistake, every bad decision, every lost opportunity. Instead of blaming others or circumstances, you analyze it. Why did it happen? What could you have done differently? What weakness did it reveal? What strength can you build from it? Accountability is uncomfortable, but it strengthens your mind. It forces your brain to confront reality, analyze it, and grow from it. This level of self-awareness creates extraordinary mental clarity. Your mind becomes sharper when you learn to control your pace. Not everything requires a quick reaction. Not every situation needs immediate action. A sharp mind knows when to move fast and when to move slowly. Sometimes patience is intelligence. Sometimes waiting is strategy. Sometimes silence is power. The wise mind does not rush. It calculates. It waits for the right moment, and that timing makes the decision far more effective. Another way to sharpen your mind is by identifying your triggers, the things that make you emotional, impulsive, reactive. Everyone has triggers, but only the sharpest minds understand and control them. When you know what triggers you, you can prepare mentally, avoid traps, and protect your clarity. This self-knowledge prevents manipulation because people can no longer pull your strings. If you truly want to push your mental sharpness into the elite level, practice analyzing people's motivations instead of their words. Words can lie, actions can hide intentions, but motivations rarely change. If you understand someone's motivation, you understand their behavior before it happens. This gives you power because you can predict their moves, guide conversations, avoid traps, and stay 10 steps ahead. Your intelligence becomes sharper every time you choose discipline over comfort. Comfort makes the mind soft. Discipline makes the mind strong. It trains your brain to handle pressure, resist impulses, and focus deeply. The more disciplined your daily life becomes, in habits, in sleep, in work, in study, the sharper your entire mental system becomes. Consistency creates clarity. Clarity creates intelligence. The journey to a 200% sharper mind is not about sudden transformation. It is about small choices made every day. Choices that strengthen awareness, clarity, discipline, observation, and strategy. Over time, these choices reshape your thinking at a deep level. You begin to understand people better, make faster decisions, think more deeply, analyze more accurately, and act more intelligently. Your mind stops functioning like everyone else's and begins operating on a higher level, a Machiavellian level. As your mind sharpens, you start to recognize that most people live in illusions built by their own insecurities. They are afraid to confront their weaknesses, so they pretend to be strong. They are afraid to admit they are confused, so they pretend to be confident. They fear being exposed, so they hide behind loudness, arrogance, or fake certainty. A sharp mind sees through all of this. You no longer take people at surface level. You look deeper. You listen between their lines. You observe how their behavior shifts in different environments. You read the emotional fingerprints they leave behind. And when you can read people this way, you gain an undeniable psychological advantage. Another important principle of sharpening your mind is understanding that not everything requires your reaction. Most situations lose power the moment you refuse to respond. A dull mind reacts instantly. A sharp mind waits. It lets the situation settle, lets emotions fade, lets truth reveal itself. Reaction is the weapon of the impulsive. Restraint is the weapon of the intelligent. When you master restraint, your mind becomes sharper because you are no longer controlled by external forces. You control yourself, and therefore you control the outcome. Machiavelli understood that knowledge becomes powerful only when it is applied. Many people consume wisdom but never use it. They read books, watch motivational videos, listen to advice, but their actions stay the same. A sharp mind doesn't just learn, it applies. Every insight becomes a tool. Every mistake becomes a lesson. Every experience becomes data. When you start treating life like a training ground rather than a series of random events, your intelligence grows at an extraordinary rate. Your mind sharpens when you stop engaging in meaningless arguments. Most debates are ego battles, not truth-seeking conversations. A dull mind argues to win. A sharp mind observes to understand. Instead of wasting energy trying to prove your point, you analyze why the other person thinks the way they do. You look for their fear, their emotional attachment, their insecurity. You learn more from silence than others learn from shouting. This level of detachment makes your mind clearer, faster, and more strategic. To sharpen your mind further, practice seeing the long-term consequence of every action. Most people think only about what feels good right now. A sharp mind thinks about how today's decisions shape tomorrow. Every move has a ripple, every reaction has a cost, every word plants a seed. When you start thinking long-term, your intelligence rises above the average person instantly because you are making choices from a place of awareness rather than impulse. Another powerful method for sharpening your mind is developing the ability to remain calm in unpredictable situations. Chaos reveals the true intelligence of a person. Anyone can think clearly when life is peaceful, but only a sharp mind remains focused when everything feels out of control. Calmness under chaos is a superpower. It slows the world down. It gives you time to think. It gives you clarity when others panic. Machiavelli noted that leaders who stay composed during crisis hold more power than armies because their clarity becomes contagious. When your mind stays calm, your intelligence skyrockets. Mental sharpness also develops when you pay attention to details without losing sight of the big picture. Most people can do one or the other. They either drown in details or ignore them completely. But a sharp mind learns to zoom in and zoom out. You study the small clues, the subtle signs, the hidden gestures while also keeping the overall strategy in mind. This dual perspective allows your brain to process information at a much higher level. You understand situations deeply and broadly at the same time, which is rare and extremely powerful. Another aspect of sharpening the mind is mastering the art of selective ignorance. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every problem is yours to solve. Not every opinion matters. Not every invitation should be accepted. When you protect your attention like a treasure, your mind gains strength. Your thinking becomes more focused. Your creativity increases. Your decisions become intentional. A sharp mind knows that what you ignore is just as important as what you focus on. A stronger mind also comes from the ability to observe yourself objectively. Watch your habits, your emotional responses, your impulses, your strengths, and your blind spots. Become your own analyst. Most people run from their flaws, but a sharp mind examines them. You cannot sharpen a blade without knowing where it is dull. Self-observation creates awareness, and awareness creates immense mental growth. When you know yourself deeply, no one can manipulate you, confuse you, or shake you. To make your mind 200% sharper, expose yourself to uncomfortable truths. Growth is painful because it forces your brain to move beyond its old patterns. But the moment you embrace discomfort, your mental capacity expands. You stop being afraid of difficult conversations, difficult tasks, difficult emotions. You learn to confront reality directly. This courage sharpens your thinking because it removes denial, and denial is the enemy of intelligence. Another key to sharpening the mind is reducing emotional attachment to outcomes. When you cling too tightly to a result, your thinking becomes desperate and distorted. But when you do your best and let go of forceful expectations, your mind stays light, clear, and flexible. You begin to think strategically instead of fearfully. Detachment gives your brain room to think creatively and confidently. Your mind also sharpens when you start valuing logic over impulse. Learning to distinguish between what you feel and what is true is one of the greatest forms of intelligence. Emotions are temporary signals. Logic is long-term structure. A sharp mind uses emotions as data, but uses logic for decisions. This balance creates superior clarity. As you continue this journey, you begin to realize that mental sharpness is not about being perfect or knowing everything. It is about staying awake. It is about learning continuously, observing deeply, acting intentionally, and thinking independently. It is about training your mind like a warrior trains his body, with discipline, focus, and relentless refinement. And when your mind reaches this level, everything changes. People start treating you differently. They sense your confidence, your clarity, your insight. They respect your decisions. They seek your opinions. They fear deceiving you, and they admire your stability. Not because you said anything special, but because your mind operates on a higher plane. This is the transformation a Machiavellian mind creates. A mind that sees clearly, thinks deeply, acts strategically, and grows continuously. As your mind sharpens further, you begin to understand the subtle difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is instinct. Response is intelligence. Reaction is fast but blind. Response is calm but precise. Most people live in reaction mode, jumping from one emotional trigger to another, letting the world dictate their mood, their decisions, their words. A sharp mind steps back, observes the situation from a distance, and then responds with intention. This shift alone elevates your mental power to extraordinary levels because you no longer operate from impulse. You operate from strategy. The sharper your mind becomes, the more you realize that life is a chessboard, not a playground. Every move matters. Every conversation shapes perception. Every choice creates ripples. Every silence communicates something. A dull mind lives randomly. A sharp mind lives deliberately. You become aware that you are always sending signals through your posture, your tone, your timing, your energy. Once you understand this, you begin aligning your behavior with your long-term goals, not your temporary emotion. This alignment is rare, and it gives you an advantage that others cannot easily decode. A Machiavellian mind also understands the value of invisibility. Sometimes the most powerful strategy is to be underestimated. When people think you are harmless, simple, or uninformed, they reveal their true intentions more openly. They relax their guard. They make mistakes. A sharp mind knows when to display strength and when to conceal it. Intelligence is not loud. It is subtle. It is flexible. It is strategic. You learn to pick your moments carefully. When to speak, when to stay silent, when to agree, when to withdraw. This ability makes your mind incredibly sharp because it teaches you to use subtlety as a weapon. Another way your mind grows sharper is through the mastery of patience. Patience is not waiting. Patience is watching. Patience is studying the field while others rush blindly. Patience allows you to gather information, understand patterns, and predict outcomes. Most people are slaves to urgency, but urgency clouds judgment. A sharp mind knows that the best decisions often need time. Not because you are slow, but because you are precise. Just as a diamond forms under long pressure, a sharp mind forms under patient observation. Mental sharpness also increases when you learn to separate your identity from your ego. Ego always wants to be right. Ego wants recognition, applause, validation. Ego takes offense quickly. Identity, however, seeks truth. It seeks growth. It seeks understanding. A sharp mind is not threatened by correction. It welcomes it. It doesn't need to win every argument. It needs to learn from every argument. The moment your ego stops ruling your decisions, intelligence takes its place. Another layer of sharp thinking comes from mastering emotional timing. Knowing when to show emotion and when to withhold it is an elite skill. If you show anger too early, you lose advantage. If you show fear, you open the door to manipulation. If you show enthusiasm too quickly, you give away your desires. A sharp mind distributes emotion strategically, never predictably, never excessively. You choose the right emotional response for the right moment. This ability turns you into a psychological force because no one can read you easily. As your mind sharpens, your relationship with failure changes completely. You stop seeing failure as an enemy and start seeing it as a teacher. Failure becomes data. It becomes a map of your weak points. It reveals what you must change, what you must strengthen, what you must avoid. Most people fear failure because they fear judgment, but a sharp mind sees failure as feedback, and feedback is fuel for growth. When you lose the fear of failure, your courage increases and your clarity becomes unstoppable. A highly sharp mind also recognizes that not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Your ideas, plans, dreams, and strategies should not be exposed to those who cannot understand them or may use them against you. Selective sharing is a sign of intelligence. When you reveal less, you protect more. When you share only what is necessary, your influence grows because mystery amplifies power. Machiavelli often emphasized that unpredictability confuses opponents and keeps you in a position of advantage. Another important practice for sharpening your mind is analyzing situations without personal bias. Most people see things the way they want to see them, not the way they actually are. But a sharp mind learns to see reality without distortion. You remove your preferences, your fears, your personal agenda, and you look at the situation with cold clarity. This type of objectivity gives you a massive mental advantage because you make decisions based on truth, not illusion. Your mind becomes even sharper when you learn to control your environment. Surroundings shape thinking. Noise weakens focus. Disorder weakens energy. Toxic people weaken clarity. When you create an environment that supports deep thinking, whether it's a quiet room, a structured routine, or a circle of disciplined minds, your brain starts functioning at a higher level. Environment is an unseen force that shapes intelligence more than people realize. Another layer of sharpness comes from mastering your energy. Your mental performance depends heavily on how you conserve and direct your energy. Every argument you avoid saves mental strength. Every distraction you eliminate sharpens focus. Every boundary you enforce protects your mind. A sharp mind is not just about strategy. It's about preserving the fuel that powers strategy. When your energy is intact, your thoughts become faster, your creativity increases, and your analysis becomes far deeper. Over time, you realize that mental sharpness is closely tied to self-respect. When you respect yourself, you don't tolerate what dulls your mind. Low-value distractions, draining people, unhealthy habits, meaningless commitments. You guard your mind like a fortress, and the more you protect it, the sharper it becomes. Eventually, you enter a state where your intelligence feels effortless. Thinking becomes faster, decisions become clearer, patterns appear instantly. People become predictable. Challenges become puzzles rather than threats. You begin to understand that true mental sharpness is not just about intellect. It is about awareness, discipline, emotional mastery, observation, adaptability, and strategic thinking combined into one cohesive force. This level of sharpness is rare because it requires intention, effort, and sacrifice. But once you reach it, you stand out without trying. You influence without forcing. You lead without demanding. You remain calm while others panic. You see solutions before others even see the problem. And that is the mark of a truly powerful Machiavellian mind. A mind that is 200% sharper, more aware, more strategic, and more in control than the world around it. Every human psyche carries fears that are invisible on the surface but powerful underneath. And within the feminine mind, there is one fear so ancient, so deeply woven into instinct and emotion that it shapes attraction, loyalty, respect, and even conflict, yet almost no one speaks about it. It is the fear of losing herself in the presence of someone stronger than her emotionally. Not stronger in dominance, not stronger in cruelty, but stronger in presence. A presence that threatens to make her feel vulnerable, exposed, and unable to maintain control. This fear is subtle, hidden behind confidence, laughter, independence, and even silence, but it is always there. And when we enter the world of Machiavellian dark psychology, we see not the manipulation, but the truth. People fear what they cannot command inside themselves. A woman may look fearless, powerful, accomplished, but beneath that is a deeper instinct. She fears the moment she meets someone who can read her without her speaking, someone who sees through her armor, who detects her emotions before she understands them, someone who can influence her heart without force. It is the fear of emotional transparency. Because emotional transparency removes her shield, it disarms her internal defenses. And this is the one thing the feminine mind hides from the world. She fears being fully seen by someone she secretly admires. She fears the man who is calm where others are reactive, the man who listens where others argue, the man who notices details that others overlook. This is not the man who chases her. This is the man she cannot predict. And unpredictability in the psychological world is more powerful than beauty, more powerful than charm, more powerful than status. Because unpredictability awakens curiosity, and curiosity awakens vulnerability. Vulnerability awakens fear. In the silent corners of her mind, she fears emotional surrender. Not physical surrender, not romantic surrender, but the surrender of losing the power to hide her truth. Because once she is emotionally exposed, she feels she can be hurt. She feels she can be abandoned. She feels she can be controlled, not by the man, but by her own emotions. Her fear is not him. Her fear is what he awakens inside her. And this is where Machiavellian psychology becomes relevant, not as manipulation, but as observation. Machiavelli said that people fear what they cannot control, but he never said the fear must come from danger. Sometimes the fear comes from desire. And when a woman feels a desire she cannot logically explain, her instinct reacts as if she is standing on unstable ground. She may pull away, she may test, she may deny her own feelings, not because she lacks affection, but because she fears how powerful that affection is. She fears disappearing into someone's gravity. She fears losing the emotional independence she has built. She fears trusting the wrong person. She fears needing someone more than they need her. And this fear is so deep that she will often disguise it as anger, indifference, overconfidence, or withdrawal. Many men misunderstand this. They think she is rejecting them, disrespecting them, losing interest, but in dark psychology, behaviors are never what they appear. Her fear hides behind opposite expressions. She becomes distant because she is overwhelmed. She becomes cold because she is warming up too fast. She becomes silent because her emotions are too loud. The feminine fear that no one talks about is the fear of emotional imbalance, the fear that someone else has the power to shift her inner world. She fights to keep control because losing emotional control is the deepest danger to her. This is why she tests a man's consistency, why she challenges his patience, why she pushes and pulls. These are not manipulations, they are survival instincts. She needs to know if the person who entered her emotional walls is stable enough to stay. And she needs to know if she is strong enough to let him in without losing herself. In the Machiavellian frame, the most powerful individuals are those who are not controlled by fear. But many women carry this secret burden quietly because society never allows them to express. They are told to be strong, independent, unbothered. They are told emotions are weakness. And so the fear stays buried, expressed only through behavior. Imagine a woman who built her identity around emotional strength. She has been hurt, betrayed, misunderstood. She promised herself she would never depend on anyone again. But then she meets someone whose presence softens her guard. Suddenly the rules she created no longer work, and this triggers the secret fear. If I let myself feel again, will I survive it? If I trust again, will I regret it? If I fall, who will catch me? The fear is not that he will hurt her. The fear is that her emotions will overpower her logic. In dark psychology, the mind always protects itself from threats, real or imagined. An emotional surrender is a psychological threat. She fears being replaced. She fears not being enough. She fears wanting someone who may not want her as strongly. These fears whisper quietly but influence loudly. They shape her decisions, her reactions, her defenses. And the irony is that the woman who fears being hurt often hurts herself by not embracing what she truly wants. When she meets a man who carries calmness like a weapon, who is grounded, who doesn't rush, who doesn't seek validation, who is emotionally disciplined, she feels drawn yet threatened. Not because he is dangerous, but because he is rare. A rare presence affects the nervous system. It creates internal instability, and instability triggers fear. A woman may walk away from a man she deeply wants just to regain the illusion of control. She may create distance to calm the storm inside her. She may test him not for dominance, but for reassurance. In her world, consistency is safety. Confidence is attraction, but emotional depth is danger. And the secret is this: she's not afraid of him. She is afraid of her own heart in his hands. Even though he may never misuse it, the fear itself becomes a shadow she can't escape. This is the fear no one talks about. The fear of losing emotional autonomy. If you observe the feminine psyche without judgment, you will see the truth. She becomes attached slowly but deeply. She protects herself not because she is cold, but because she remembers everything that once broke her. And sometimes she will even sabotage a relationship just to avoid reliving her past. This is not weakness, it is psychological self-defense. The tragedy is that many men misinterpret these behaviors as games or manipulation. They respond with frustration instead of patience, ego instead of understanding, detachment instead of stability. When she senses this, her fear deepens. But when she senses a man who remains unmoved by chaos, who remains composed when she is overwhelmed, who listens instead of reacting, who stays honest instead of defensive, fear begins to dissolve. The feminine fear is not solved through dominance or persuasion. It is dissolved through emotional safety, and emotional safety comes from consistency, sincerity, patience, and presence. Not perfection, presence. And the deeper truth is this: she wants to surrender emotionally, she wants to trust deeply, but she needs to feel that the ground beneath her is steady enough to stand on. She needs to feel that the person holding her emotions is strong enough not to drop them. She needs to feel that she can lose control without losing herself. In dark psychology, the most powerful force is not fear, it is understanding. The moment a man understands the secret feminine fear, he stops reacting to behavior and starts responding to emotion. He sees the hidden meaning behind her silence. He hears the message behind her words. He recognizes that her fear is simply a desire protected by caution. And this changes everything. Because the fear that no one talks about is actually a doorway. When she feels emotionally safe with someone, the fear transforms into connection. Vulnerability becomes trust. Guarding becomes intimacy. And the very thing she was afraid of becomes the thing she cherishes most. In the end, her secret fear reveals her deepest capacity to love. It shows that underneath independence, confidence, and strength lies a heart that feels intensely, dreams deeply, and hopes silently. And once that fear fades, the feminine soul reveals its most powerful truth, not weakness but courage, because opening up after fear is the bravest act of all. There is a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that the person she fears is also the person she is drawn to the most. It's not because he threatens her. It's not because he challenges her strength. It's because he awakens something inside her that she cannot control. And the feminine mind is wired to protect itself from anything that feels bigger than logic. This is why she becomes cautious with certain men, even when her heart leans forward. She wants to step closer, but her instincts pull her back. There is a silent war inside her between desire and self-protection, between curiosity and caution, between the part of her that wants to leap and the part that whispers, "Be careful." This inner conflict is something she does not show to the world. She hides it behind her smile, behind her sarcasm, behind her busy routines, behind her independence. But deep inside, she is constantly measuring emotional risks. She observes everything: the tone of his voice, the way he looks at her, the rhythm of his presence. She notices small changes before he even realizes them. Because her fear is not about him leaving. Her fear is about her being the only one who feels deeply. Her fear is about imbalance. Giving more than she receives, opening more than he does, caring more than he admits. This imbalance threatens her emotional survival. A woman's heart is like a vault with two locks. One lock guarded by memory and the other by instinct. Memory reminds her of every time she trusted too easily. Instinct reminds her of every time she ignored her intuition. Together, they protect her from repeating what once broke her. And this is why she moves carefully, slowly, not because she lacks feeling, but because she feels too much. When a man brings stability, she softens. When he brings chaos, she retreats. When he brings inconsistency, she shuts down. But when he brings presence, true presence, the kind that feels grounded, attentive, aware, she becomes vulnerable. Presence is the most dangerous thing to her, because presence means he is emotionally available. And emotional availability forces her to confront her own desires. It forces her to acknowledge that she wants something she cannot fully control. She fears the moments when her thoughts start revolving around him. When she catches herself thinking about his message, waiting for his call, remembering his words. This is the moment her fear intensifies. Because the moment she begins to care, she feels exposed. And exposure for her is not physical. It is emotional. Emotional exposure means he has entered spaces inside her that she usually guards with layers of boundaries, and this is why she tests. Not to manipulate, but to check if her emotions are safe. A test is not a game. It is a question. She wants to know, will he stay consistent if I pull back? Will he stay patient if I become silent? Will he stay calm if I express my fears? She wants to know if he is someone she can surrender her guard to. Because surrender is not something she gives easily. It is something she gives once in a lifetime. Many men misunderstand her fear. They think she is dramatic, confusing, complicated. But the truth is simple. She is protecting the most sensitive part of herself. A woman who fears deeply is a woman who loves deeply. A woman who guards intensely is a woman who will give intensely once she feels safe. Her secret fear also comes from losing her identity in love. Society teaches her that losing herself is weakness, but her heart tells her that deep connection is strength. This duality makes her cautious. She wants to love, but she doesn't want to disappear. She wants connection, but she doesn't want dependency. She wants presence, but she doesn't want possession. And so she walks the tightrope between desire and self-respect, between longing and independence. When she meets a man who stays unshaken through all of this, she begins to trust. When he doesn't rush her emotions, when he doesn't pressure her pace, when he doesn't react to her fears with ego, she feels something rare, safety. And safety is the antidote to her secret fear. Safety dissolves her defenses. Safety melts her hesitation. Safety invites her to open the doors she once locked. Safety allows her to breathe into her emotions without feeling guilty or weak. A woman's deepest fear is not heartbreak. It is regret. She doesn't fear pain. She has survived it before. She fears giving her heart to someone who will waste it. She fears choosing wrong. She fears ignoring her intuition and paying the price later. And this fear is why she becomes distant even when she wants to be close. She must be absolutely certain before she steps forward. When she feels seen, not judged, not analyzed, but truly seen, her fear begins to fade. When a man looks at her and sees her strength and softness together, her armor loosens. When he listens to the silence behind her words, she feels understood. Ooh. When he stays stable when she becomes emotional, she feels valued. And when he doesn't exploit her vulnerability, she finally feels ready to open. The feminine fear that no one talks about is actually a doorway to deep connection. It is the threshold she must cross before she lets someone into her soul. And this threshold is sacred. Only a man who is emotionally disciplined, self-aware, patient, and grounded can cross it. The truth is, she doesn't fear men. She fears giving her heart to a man who cannot hold it. She fears trusting someone who will not understand her depth. She fears loving someone who is not prepared for the intensity of her affection. And once she realizes that someone is capable, ready, steady, and sincere, fear dissolves like ice under sunlight. Then she becomes the version of herself she always hides, the version filled with tenderness, loyalty, passion, and devotion. A woman's love is not small. It is not casual. It is not temporary. It is a force that can rebuild a man's world or destroy her own, and that is why her fear exists. She is not afraid of love. She is afraid of loving the wrong person. Once she feels safe, once she feels understood, once she feels emotionally protected, she transforms. Her softness returns, her laughter deepens, her trust becomes strong, her loyalty becomes unshakable. And the fear that once controlled her becomes the reason she loves so deeply. Because she chose carefully, intentionally, powerfully, there comes a point where the feminine fear starts shaping the entire connection without a single word being spoken. It's in the pauses between conversations, the tension and silence, the way she looks away when her feelings grow too strong, the way her voice changes when she senses she's losing control. She begins to fear not the man himself, but the emotional power he holds simply by existing in her life. This is the power she pretends not to feel, the power she tries to suppress, the power she sometimes tries to escape. Because the moment she sees him as someone who can affect her inner world, she becomes alert. That alertness is ancient. It comes from generations of women who had to protect their hearts in a world that often didn't protect them. And so she becomes careful even when she doesn't want to be. She pulls away even when she wants to move closer. She says, "I'm fine," even when her mind is spinning. She pretends she's busy when she's actually thinking about him too much. She gives short replies when her emotions become too loud. And the confusing part is, the stronger her feelings grow, the more she hides them. This is her instinct, not her intention. She fears being predictable. She fears being too available. She fears giving him the advantage of knowing how deeply he affects her. But what she doesn't realize is that her fear is visible in her restraint. In Machiavellian psychology, restraint reveals desire far more than expression. Silence reveals more than confessions. Distance reveals more than closeness. A woman distances herself not when she loses interest, but when the interest becomes too powerful for her to handle comfortably. She fears losing her emotional balance. She fears becoming the one who cares more. That imbalance feels like surrender, and surrender feels like a threat to her inner stability. Deep inside, she battles with thoughts she cannot say out loud. She wonders what he feels. She wonders if he thinks about her when she disappears. She wonders if he notices her small changes. She wonders if her absence bothers him. She wonders if she is just another moment in his life or something he silently values. These thoughts consume her more than she ever admits. And every unanswered question becomes part of her fear. What intensifies her fear the most is uncertainty. Masculine uncertainty is her emotional kryptonite. When he becomes unpredictable, not in a chaotic, irresponsible way, but in a calm, unbothered, self-focused way, she feels unsteady. A man who is self-contained, emotionally disciplined, and not desperate for her attention triggers a deep instinct inside her. She fears losing someone she doesn't even fully have yet. This is one of the most silent, unspoken fears, the fear of potential loss before anything has even begun. She wants assurance but fears asking for it. She wants clarity but fears appearing needy. She wants closeness but fears giving the invitation. So she waits. She observes. She hides her feelings to see if he reveals his. She retreats slightly, hoping he will step forward. She slows down, hoping he will match her pace. And this dance of hesitation becomes the battlefield where both attraction and fear collide. If the man reacts with impatience or insecurity, her fear grows stronger. But if he reacts with calmness, understanding, or steady presence, her fear begins to shift. Because fear does not disappear through pressure, it dissolves through consistency. When he remains emotionally stable, even when she is unsure, distant, overwhelmed, it sends a message to her subconscious: you are safe here. And safety is the one thing that dismantles her defenses. Yet there is another layer to her fear, one even deeper, darker, more shadowed by past hurts. It is the fear that she herself is too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too complex, too intense, too loving, too demanding, too fragile, too passionate, too expressive. She fears overwhelming the man she cares about. She fears not being enough and being too much at the same time. This paradox shapes her behavior more than anything else. She hides her depth because she fears he cannot handle it. She hides her affection because she fears it may scare him away. She hides her vulnerability because she fears it will make her dependent. And so she becomes the version of herself that feels safest, controlled, composed, mysterious, slightly distant, slightly unpredictable. She does this not to play games, but to survive her own feelings. What she truly wants is simple. A place where she can be soft without being taken for granted, where she can be emotional without being judged, where she can be expressive without being dismissed, where she can surrender without losing herself. But she has learned that not everyone deserves access to her softness. Not everyone has earned the right to see the real woman behind the fear. When a man understands this, truly understands the psychological weight of her hidden fear, he becomes someone she instinctively trusts. Not because he forces her to, not because he persuades her, but because his presence speaks louder than any promises. A woman listens not to a man's words, but to his energy. His energy tells her everything, whether he is stable, whether he is kind, whether he is patient, whether he is consistent, whether he is someone she can risk her heart with. Her greatest fear becomes her greatest surrender when she meets a man whose energy feels like home. The irony is that the more she resists her feelings, the deeper they grow. Fighting her emotions does not weaken them, it intensifies them. Distance makes her think more, silence makes her feel more. Space makes her desire more, because what she's truly afraid of is how powerful her own heart becomes when it chooses someone. And when her fear finally breaks, when she decides she can trust him, she reveals a version of herself that is rare, breathtaking, and fiercely loyal. She opens the door completely. She lets him into her mind, her emotions, her insecurities, her dreams. She loves with a depth that most men never experience. But that depth only appears after she conquers the fear that guarded. This is the feminine secret. The fear is not a barrier to love. It is a test of the soul. She gives the deepest parts of herself only to the one who proves he can hold them.